And now we have Raticate. You know, I think it's funny it took us this long to cover a Gen 1 early game Pokemon, but yeah, I guess that's just how it goes. Raticate is perhaps best known for the Indigo League episode in which an older gentleman cons young Ash into a Raticate for Butterfree trade. It was also used to frightening effect by Team Rocket's much more menacing duo, Butch and Cassidy. Also, of course, Rattata is infamous for the Fear strategy with Focus Sash, Endeavor, and Quick Attack, which was later perfected by Aaron a generation later. Today, we're going to examine this large fanged rodent's impact on the competitive scene. And so, we ask, how good was Raticate actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. If you squint pretty hard, you can actually find the slightest of slight rolls for Raticate in RBYOU. It shares one of metagame giants Tauros and Snorlax's best traits, nearly unresisted normal stab, as the ghost type Gengar was quite rare, and the tier's rock types, Rhydon and Golem, also came with partial ground typing that left them completely destroyed by Raticate's Bubble Beam. Raticate also had a solid base 97 speed that got the jump on much of the OU metagame. However, Raticate also had a ton of flaws. It had absolutely miserable bulk on both the physical and special side, and its base 81 attack stat was quite unimpressive, meaning that one didn't have to resist its moves to not take much damage from them. Its base 97 speed gave it a solid critical hit rate of roughly 19%, but it still usually wasn't hitting hard enough even with crits to really make much of an impact, and it wasn't fast enough to outrun several OU staples in Zapdos, Tauros, Starmie, and Alakazam, all of which absolutely destroyed it because of how frail Raticate was. So what was the impetus behind Raticate's slight semblance of an OU niche? Super Fang, that's what. Cutting the target's HP in half was nothing to sneeze at, and what's more, it put opponents in range to be finished off by Raticate's Stab Hyper Beam, made even scarier by its nasty critical hit rate that closely resembled Zapdos's. Of course, while this was a cute little niche, it wasn't meant for any semblance of serious play. Raticate didn't seriously threaten anything one-on-one, making it nigh impossible for it to get off a Super Fang without being irrevocably destroyed itself, given how it was immensely frail and completely ruined by Thunder Wave, making it so that it couldn't even threaten the physically soft Chansey. The only Pokemon Raticate could safely switch into were sleeping ones, but Tauros and Snorlax were better at gaining ground in that scenario. Raticate also had significant problems with Recover Starmie and Alakazam, who would foil its Super Fang strategy by outspeeding Raticate and spamming Recover until Super Fang ran out of PP or missed. While this wouldn't work if they suffered paralysis from Raticate's Stab Body Slam, Raticate wasn't going to get on the field reliably, and it would need for this scenario to become a reality enough of the time for it to be worthwhile. However, it was a fun gimmick to play around with. In UU, it was alright, still immensely frail, but it could dish out more damage, at least as long as there wasn't a Haunter on the opposing team, which unfortunately there was quite a lot of the time, which held Raticate back from causing any real havoc too often. Generation 2 brought Steel types, Leftovers, and the combination of Rest and Sleep Talk, and a nerfed Hyper Beam. All of these were supremely bad news for Raticate and its Super Fang, and it no longer stood a ghost of a chance in OU, especially because Mischievous was now a part of the tier, and Gengar was a lot more common as well. Raticate did now have anti-ghost Shadow Ball, but it was too weak to leave much of an impact, and it generally preferred to run moves that were better overall, like Substitute and Mimic, in addition to its obligatory Body Slam and Super Fang. All of these same factors holding Raticate back in OU were present in UU as well, right down to Haunter acting as a pseudo Gengar. In NU, opposing Pokemon were generally more squishy, meaning Raticate could theoretically do more damage, but two things got in the way of that. One, Raticate's own squishiness, which meant it was smacked around by just about everything from the faster Rapidash to the fighting type Primate to even the attacks from tankier Pokemon like Xatu, Dugong, and Weezing. And two, the fact that it was still just not strong enough to break through said tanky Pokemon. It also couldn't escape being walled by Pseudo Gengar even all the way down in NU, as Ghastly, yes that's right, Ghastly, was quite a good Pokemon, and running Shadow Ball not only impeded on Raticate's 4 move slots, it wouldn't even do anything against the rat's other numerous issues like Pseudo Wudo. Raticate was just too weak, too frail, and too starved for useful moves to be of any real use. Raticate finally received a much needed power boost in Generation 3 with the addition of Choice Band, finally allowing its attacks to actually deal damage to opposing Pokemon. It didn't end there though. Thanks to the Guts ability and a new stab in Facade, with some prediction to switch in on Toxic, Raticate could potentially nuke just about everything in sight. However, even without this, its double edge was devastating. But not in OU of course, and Big Mama Kanga would never be unseated from her UU throne. But in NU, Raticate was an absolute terror. It was the tier's fastest Pokemon, eclipsing Pokemon already considered fast, like Haunter and Plusle. Thanks to this and the immediate power of Choice Band, it was one of the most immediately dangerous Pokemon around, threatening much of the tier with instant death. It was walled by Sableye, but that wasn't much of a problem because Sableye was also used to counter Tier King Hitmonchan, who could simply slap on Toxic, and that was more or less taken care of. Besides Sableye, there wasn't much that could truly take Raticate on safely. Both Metang and Relicanth didn't like Hidden Power Ground, and if Raticate ate a Toxic, then its facade would plow through them as well. It also naturally threatened a ton of the metagame with ease. Chimecho, Roselia, Wailord, Blossom, Flareon, Glalie, and those were just some of the best Pokemon around, to say nothing of the rest of the metagame, pretty much all of which was terrified of Raticate. It wasn't easy to get onto the field thanks to its frailty, but the prediction required to do so would now reap major rewards as the Raticate user found themselves outspeeding and destroying the opposition. Raticate wasn't one note either. It could also swap out its Choice Band for a less immediate but incredibly devastating Lychee Berry reversal set. And that said, even if it could only run Choice Band, it would have been terrific. So overall, Raticate was one of Advanced NU's most defining, dangerous Pokemon. Raticate got some excellent new toys in the 4th generation. It could insta-activate its guts and boost its facade with Toxic or Flame Orb. It received Swords Dance to boost its attack to astonishing levels. It got a powerful priority move in Sucker Punch, and it got the generally amazing U-turn. Now these boosts were nice, but Raticate was still incredibly frail, not to mention completely helpless against steals, even with the addition of Flame Wheel. So OU was out of the question. In UU, it was completely and utterly outclassed by Swellow, who had incredible speed, secondary stab in Brave Bird, and a higher attack stat to boot. So to NU, Raticate went once again, and it wasn't bad there. It hit much of the metagame really hard, and its base 97 speed was excellent for out-offensing one of the tier's most prominent, dangerous offensive Pokemon, Jinx, as well as other staples like Gardevoir and Medicham, all while not being walled by bulky Pokemon like Slowking. However, it had a huge roadblock in the form of Regirock, who Raticate could not scratch no matter what. It just wasn't worth fitting Super Fang into its move slot, as that would take crucial options like Crunch away from letting Raticate do what it was meant to do in outspeeding opposing offense, and what Super Fang did wasn't worth enough to give up on that. Regirock was a staple of NU, so one could expect to see it, and what's more, while it was the most common rock type, it wasn't the only one. Golem and Rhydon were also solid Pokemon that Raticate was helpless against. The most it could do was force them in and capitalize on their switch with U-turn to allow for a teammate to come in against them safely. As if all this wasn't bad enough, NU had another terrific normal type attacker, Tauros, who lacked Raticate's power but was incredibly fast and packed crucial coverage in Earthquake. It was frustrating as Raticate was so close to being great. As if opposing rock types were dealt with, it was an absolute terror. The problem was that those rock types, renowned for their sturdiness, were not so easy to move, and thus Tauros was a superior choice most of the time. That said, while this major flaw prevented consistent usage, Raticate's upsides made it worth trying on occasion, and Tauros only wished it could make Slowking drop like Raticate's facade did. Raticate didn't get any notable boosts in Gen 5, so it was no surprise that it tumbled down to NU once again. However, this time around, it wasn't just mostly outclassed but with a small niche of its own. This time, it was completely outclassed in every which way. Tauros was back and stronger than ever thanks to sheer force, but that wasn't what pushed Raticate into the realm of untiered, because spoiler alert, that's where it wound up. Kangaskhan was another excellent normal type attacker, but that was also not quite what did Raticate in. Swellow was NU now, and we already know from the 4th generation segment that Swellow completely outclassed our beloved Rat. However, even that was not the final nail in the Coffagrigus for Raticate's NU viability. That would be Zangoose, who, now that it had the Toxic boost ability, was the T1000 to Raticate's T800. Zangoose did have lower speed than Raticate, but it still outsped tier staple Sock, and generally more than made up for it with its other qualities, such as the fact that it wasn't just slightly stronger than Raticate's base 81 attack like Swellow was with its base 85. It was a lot stronger, with a whopping base 115. After a Swords Dance, its facade one-hit KO'd even the incredibly bulky Alomomola and Eviolite Tangela. Zangoose also had hugely important coverage in the powerful close combat, whose importance in shattering Regirock could not be overstated. There really was no reason at all to eschew this absolute monster, who was one of NU's most devastating Pokemon, in favor of the thoroughly disappointing Raticate, to say nothing of the rest of NU's excellent normal types, Swellow, Kangaskhan, and Tauros running around. As such, Raticate was never used even in never use, cementing its position among the first generation of untiered Pokemon. While it's not exactly surprising to see it with this rank, it still stings a little. Despite being one of the more recognizable Gen 1 Pokemon, Raticate did not receive a much needed Mega in the 6th generation, having to watch from the sidelines while even Beedrill got one. It should come as no surprise that NU was inhospitable to it once again, but at least this time, there was hope. There was a new tier below NU called PU, where perhaps Raticate could flourish. Unfortunately, that hope was quickly extinguished by another forgotten, beleaguered normal type that happened to be one of the metagame's most dangerous threats. Ursaring, also an abuser of Stab Facade, boosted further by Swords Dance, but unlike Raticate, it had an enormous base attack stat of 130 that made even Zangoose look weak. And like Zangoose, it also had that all-important coverage move, Close Combat, to crush the rocks and steels like Golem and Probopass that Raticate would never break through. Ursaring also boosted its attack even further with Guts, but it had the option of compensating for its low speed with Quick Feet, making it so that Raticate really had absolutely nothing over it. Once again, Raticate was not used at all, even in the lowest tier, and once again found itself untiered. PU looked like cheese at first, but wound up just being another rat trap. Generation 7 gave Raticate a decent new coverage move in the ground type Stomping Tantrum, but to nobody's surprise, it wasn't nearly enough to save it from hitting untiered for the 3rd generation in a row, as it was once again wholly outclassed even all the way down in PU. There was no way anyone looking to win was going to choose Raticate over Stoutland, Zangoose, or Kangaskhan. But wait, there's hope. Generation 7 gave Raticate something else, a regional form. The Dark and Normal type Alolan Raticate showed some promise in the bottommost tier. Its base attack stat was a few points lower than its Cantonian counterpart, but it got a power boost from the Hustle ability. It also crucially was significantly slower, dropping from 97 speed to 77 speed, but it now had Stab on its Sucker Punch, allowing it to hit faster Pokemon significantly harder, making up for the fact that the move had been nerfed to 70 base power from its original 80 in prior generations. It was also still quite powerful thanks to the boost from Hustle and Swords Dance. Speaking of power boost, Alolan Raticate was able to make use of the much appreciated Z Crystals that turned one of its other stabs, Double Edge and Knockoff, into a brutal breakneck blitz, or a blistering black hole eclipse. The Z moves bypassing Hustle's force accuracy drop was a major help as well. It did seem to have a nice little niche, but as time went on, it was very clear that Alolan Raticate wasn't being used for a reason. It had the viability death sentence. That was the awful combination of fragility and low speed, especially when plagued by weaknesses to common attacks, and it wasn't nearly a powerful enough sweeper to make it worth not just using, but also taking up a team's Z Crystal over more consistent, reliable Pokemon. As such, even Alolan Raticate became untiered, which marked the 2nd time in the same generation. Even after all the abuse it's been through, that one really hurt. And that's it. So how good was Raticate? Actually, well, to put it lightly, not great. It did have the smallest, tiniest, most minuscule inkling of a semblance of a niche in the inaugural generation of OU, but it's been largely downhill since. Of course, it did have a moment in the sun in the 3rd generation's NU tier, where it was one of the metagame's most dangerous threats, and was at least worth using once in a blue moon in the following generation. However, after that, the tiering rung was unrelentingly harsh. Not only did it manage to land among the small class of Pokemon that have been untiered in all 3 generations where it was possible, but thanks to Generation 7's Alolan form, it actually managed to become untiered twice in 1 generation and 4 times in 3 generations. We've been over some ill-fated Pokemon before, but this was just rough. Unless Raticate gets some serious buffs if and when it returns to Generation 8, it's almost certain it will keep its streak going. Oh, and as for VGC, yeah, ain't no one using Raticate. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Raticate? How would you improve it? Because it could really use some improvement. Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.